Bob Cole, who probably from an endorsement from you and Grapes, when I started to really get to know him, he'd say, and he knew about that I sold fasteners. He'd say, Trace, how are the widgets? How are the widgets? And Bob, what a voice. On the top of Mount Everest of play-by-play guys, how do you define Ron, his greatness?
Well, I heard him as a 26-year-old. We were doing Rogers Hometown Hockey's a show we do up here with Sportsnet. So we go to communities all around the country on Sunday nights and do a game with local storytelling as the backdrop. And we were in St. John's, Newfoundland, his home city. And we played a play-by-play account of him doing St. Bonaventure versus St. Patrick's, a high school match, senior hockey match in Newfoundland in 1960 when he was 26. And he sounded the same as when he did the Stanley Cup the last time he did the Stanley Cup. He was incredible. Cadence, he'd gone to visit the great Foster Hewitt. He, again, was just relentless in his preparation, his studying the craft. He was meticulous about getting the names, the pronunciations to a point of irritating. He was a fun drinker. Like I would normally, early in when the group of four, Grapes would go and do his own thing in his room. Again, as I said, he didn't like to socialize because if somebody said something, he was after something. Bob was a little bit the same way. He'd go to his room. So it was usually Harry, Neil, and I and the technical and production teams in the bar. And then when Harry would call it a night, which was not, maybe 5 or 6 in, he'd go to bed. I had to keep going, right? So I needed a buddy. So I'd go knock on Bob Cole's door. And I'd go into Bob's room and we'd sit and talk. And again, he would prepare me for, some of the things that would happen in my career. I'll never forget the first time I drank with him was in Montreal, and he said, Ron, just be prepared. New brooms must sweep. So every time Labatt takes over or Molson takes over or somebody takes over, get ready. They'll clear house. So he was always arming me for, don't get too, fat on this because it could end in a heartbeat. But he had a funny way of drinking, Trip. He would pour a tall tumbler, fill it with ice, add his Captain Morgan dark rum, which you can't get in the United States. So all the referees would import it for him. And then he would add his Coca-Cola Classic. It had to be the original recipe, not the new Coke. And he would take about a half of the glass and chug it. And then he'd set it there for 30 minutes. He wouldn't touch his drink again. And then he would chug the other 30 or half and prepare a new drink. But he was a very routine-driven person. He was a pilot. He flew planes. He had worked on cruise ships. He had a fishery, so much he would appreciate your secondary, industry. He fished a little fish called capelin in Newfoundland, which they would send to Japan. And just a man of all trades. I remember Chris Cuthbert trying to think, how can I ever be Bob Cole, and listening to Bob's stories of aviation and sailing and fishing and on it, and curled. He curled in a very high level of curling in Canada. It was a big sport up here. He was also a great accomplished rower, a sculler. He could do it all. And so Chris Cuthbert just felt defeated when he would listen to Bob Cole tell stories of his life.
Did he? I never, as I got to know him, I've never asked him if he really unbuttoned his pants. That's the legend, just so he could.
Oh, for sure. Oh, God, yes. He the belt open and the fly down and the pants. So that's, I won't get into the not touching part, but he did not like to be touched. He had a lot of things that were part of his ritual to prepare his voice, which was, he listened to Frank Sinatra and all the great singers. And his whole thing was as if he was doing a radio broadcast. It was not, an account of the game. It was a sound that we were making and creating here. And he would get so mad at Harry if he jumped in too soon, or me if I yapped too much in the opening. Everything was about like a marching band. Here high, here low, and he would teach that. He said there are 4 levels. Foster Hewitt had taught him that there were 4 levels. The first is the scene set. How are they lined up for the face-off? Who's playing the point? The second is something like a hit or a great move. A third is a great save, and the fourth is the goal. And he would list, how to hit the certain point of his delivery in accordance with that formula. And he did it flawlessly. And and honestly, when we would drive, he'd sit in the passenger seat. I would drive. We always rented a car everywhere we went. I would drive, Bob Cole in the passenger seat and Harry and Don in the back. And Bob used to smoke. He quit smoking about halfway into our run, but he would smoke with a cigarette on the end of looked like a graphite hockey stick. Like he was at a pistol, right? You didn't want to mess with him. He was only 5'9", but he was tough as nails. Several times I got a little too mouthy, and he would have me up against a window, ready to throw me through.